The withdrawal reflex is an automatic response that allows you to withdraw a limb from a painful stimulus. It is a polysynaptic reflex that stimulates the sensory, association, and motor neurons. The withdrawal reflex enables you to pull your arm or leg away from the painful stimulus without having to even think about it. The more painful the stimulus is, the more intense the reflex will be. For example, stepping on a coal that is slightly hot would trigger a slower and less intense withdrawal, while stepping on a very hot coal would cause a swift and forceful withdrawal. The withdrawal reflex enables the body to withdraw an extremity from a damaging stimulus, which is usually painful, so the process has to happen very quickly. Noxious stimuli like pain or heat excite the sensory neuroreceptors, like the skin's heat receptors. The signal then travels through a primary sensory neuron, which then enters the spinal cord's dorsal horn. The primary sensory neuron then synapses with an alpha motor neuron and leaves through the ventral horns, after which it supplies excitatory input to the ipsilateral flexor muscle group. The motor neurons receive signals from inhibitory neurons and supply the antagonist muscles. This process is referred to as reciprocal inhibition. This will lead to the limb being pulled away from the noxious stimulus in less than a second. The withdrawal reflex protects humans from tissue necrosis and contact with noxious stimuli like heat or pain. It usually occurs in either the upper or lower limbs and is considered a spinal reflex. A better way to put it would be that the withdrawal reflex mediates the flexion of the limb that comes into contact with the noxious stimuli. It also inhibits the extensors of that same limb. This reflex also promotes the extensors and inhibits the flexors of the contralateral arm or leg, virtually ensuring that the opposite limb provides stabilization. Hence, some signals can cross the midline of the spinal cord to mediate the movement of the opposite limb. This response is a polysynaptic reflex, which means that interneurons are involved in mediating the reflex between the afferent, sensory, and efferent, motor, signals. It is also an intersegmental reflex arc. This means that the stimulation or inhibition of motor neurons mediate the outcomes of the reflex from multiple levels of the spinal cord. The withdrawal reflex has been important in human evolution and has helped humans to successfully avoid significant dangers. The withdrawal reflex starts when neuroreceptors detect a painful stimulus. Neuroreceptors are receptors that have the function of detecting noxious stimuli. This triggers an action potential in a sensory neuron, which goes on to deliver the signal to the spinal cord, causing multiple reflex pathways to be activated. One of these pathways goes on to excite a motor neuron, which activates the flexor muscle in the limb. Another pathway does the job of inhibiting the motor neuron that usually activates the opposing extensor muscle in the limb. This prevents the extensor muscle from counteracting the flexor muscle so that it can successfully pull the limb away from the painful stimulant. Then another pathway heads to the other side of the spinal cord and triggers a similar response in the opposing limb. Or, better put, the extensor muscle in the opposing limb is activated and the flexor muscle is inhibited. This is needed for postural support when the withdrawal reflex is activated. It is necessary for the other limb, especially the leg, to provide balance by keeping you stable and helping you hold your weight. The sensory neuron synapses with the ipsilateral motor neuron and also synapses with the contralateral motor neuron. This sends signals up the spinal cord to contract muscles that will move the person's center of gravity and stop them falling once they withdraw from the stimulus. This helps to stabilize the contralateral part of the person's body to provide stability. This is referred to as the crossed extension reflex. This reflex is not exhibited if the person is drunk, unconscious, or drugged, which is when a person is at their most vulnerable. The withdrawal reflex is extremely important as it can protect us from dangerous situations and further damage in an already bad situation.